So, okay, we're going to jump in. We don't know where this is going, okay, which is usually
that's our thing.
when it goes best. There's the number. You can text us your question. The first question that came in, honestly, everybody out there watching, they're thinking of that person. So the question, and I'm kind of paraphrasing the question, how do I handle that person that seems to tear everyone else down? I call them energy vampires. I don't know what you all call them, but every staff tends to have that person. So, Stephanie, let me throw it to you first. So, how does a leader make sure that that one person doesn't create such toxicity that it affects the rest of the team?
Well, the primary role of us as managers is to lead, manage, and hold accountable, right? But we also, beyond that, have to have standards for our culture and conduct and leaders. And this is one of the hardest parts in leadership. I'm going to speak to the sales side because that's where I was born and raised. And
Right.
and you can have some real top producers that can be toxic for cultures, and it's a challenge. And I was thankful to work for a leader who held that person to high standards. And ultimately, when that person did not meet the conduct of our workplace, wasn't there anymore. And so we model leadership. The higher up we are, the more visible we are. So that leader wasn't tolerant of it and saw through the disciplinary action where that person wasn't with us anymore. And so I believe that we pour into people, right? And so sometimes people are unaware of their blind spots, and it starts with an accountability conversation and a performance plan, but it can't be loud.
How do you have, before you get to that removal in that particular case, what kind of a conversation can we have that individual, Erik, to kind of say, hey, look, this is not where we need to be?
Yeah. I think there's a couple steps here, and the how-to is very important. It's one of the biggest questions I'm asked. How do I talk to this person? So for starters, you have to create a culture where leadership is embraced. In other words, there's an established definition of leadership. There's leadership traits. There's also your culture, to Stephanie's point. There's mission, vision, core values. If these things aren't talked about, these things will not be honored. And so we have to have a culture where we talk about that. Now, here's the conversation. If you're finding that people actively undermine people or are negative, my recommendation is a two-step process. Always have the conversation with the team as a whole and then address it individually when they cross the line. In other words, let's say this is my team here. I would say, hey, I have heard from you guys. I know that there's some undermining. I know that there's some negativity. I know that there's some gossip. Whatever the issue is, we and the rest of myself and the rest of the leaders, we're aware of it, and moving forward, it will not be tolerated because it's impacting the team and our ability to deliver for our customers or our clients. Now, if Bob does it, then I would pull him aside and say, remember that conversation we had? I said, you may not have intended this, but when you said this, when you did this, here's the impact it had on the team. I never make it about me. I make it about the team. Why? Because we're a team first organization. We're culture. I would pull things that would say, this doesn't represent who we are. And I would tell him, I would just say, hey, just consider this a verbal. You probably didn't mean it. Let's just move forward. If he did it again, then there would be a write-up on it. But I would say, hey, remember when we talked about that? You know, we don't tolerate this. This is the impact it's continually having on the team when you do this, and I need to write you up now. A lot of leaders don't have the tough conversations because they're not prepared to do the consequence steps. So I think you have to very directly.
Yeah, Stephanie, that really, when you were talking about that, we've all at some point in our career had that high performer, top biller, had all the right contacts, the biggest dollars coming through, and there was a certain amount of leadership above our pay grade saying, well, look what they're bringing to the table.
But you think about that top performer's attitude. Think about what they're prohibiting other people from bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess I would ask, we've all had some experience with these people. Do we ever regret when we finally say, you know what, it's time for a change? If we feel like we've done everything we could to improve the situation, and for whatever reason they're not interested, they're not willing to do. Looking back, can any of us say, no, I really regret that one? Because I think in every instance, our culture improves, the overall
Yeah.
atmosphere improves with it.
I think it
Stephanie,
depends, on what success is, right? I think it's natural to feel that initial wave of impact. And that could be in potentially some lost billing or revenue. It could also be in the size of relief and all the other people that come forward that are thanking you. There's positives and negatives, right? But you have to be shared on the vision and the outcome. And usually, what happens, to Erik's point, is the breakthroughs happen later.
Okay,
The
so go with this. Erik, you were talking about meetings. So think about, we're having a meeting, we're leading a meeting, and there's that person that is yawning, is poor. You mentioned body language,
Got a
poor
little
body
eye roll
language.
going.
It's all of that going on.
So
Help our leaders and managers out there with maybe some guidance on how do you handle that situation in a meeting? Because I will tell you, everyone struggles with that in their meetings.
Well, the reason that we have behaviors like that, at the end of the day, we have to accept this is a leadership issue. It's not just a person issue. Leaders are allowing it. We've allowed it a long time. So then it becomes normal. That being said, expectations have to be clearly outlined. Now, the reason that the Marines chose enthusiasm as one of their traits is if you were lacking it, they'd call you out on it. This is why we have to have mission, vision, core values. We have to have leadership traits, a leadership definition. When somebody crosses the line, it can't be just because we don't like it. It's because it's violating who we are. Here's a great tip for leaders. Get off site with people. When I tell people to get off site, it's to build those relationships and understand them. They'll talk more to you off site than they will on site. But most leaders make the error in going, well, listen, all right, Erik said I got to get off site. Stephanie's awesome. I'm taking her to coffee. I love being around her. But Speed, boy, he's a pain in the butt. He yawns in meetings.
I told you.
Yeah.
I know it was him. I know it was him. And here's the thing. If you have someone like that, that's the first person you get off site. You go into the fire. And you got to get on site and just try and get to know them as a person. Build the relationship. Find out what's going on. Maybe he's tired because he's been up all night. His wife had cancer. There could be something other than just disengagement. Maybe there's a personal side. And if we truly care about people, we just got to get to know them.
I'm sorry. I want to shift the gear back to Stephanie's session, but Erik, you referred to it. And that's a multi-generational question from the boss that said, hey, these kids today, they just don't have the attitude and the work ethic we used to. You brought up the ultimate. We have the best fighting machine in the world. And they're 18, 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
How would you guys respond to that? What do you recommend? Because we didn't really have a chance to get deep into that.
Actually, and I would even add to that, because we actually had somebody on the chat within 10 Minute Trainer Network said, listen, I'm not an official leader. I'm a senior sales rep. Any tips on how to get the office staff to appreciate the sales team as opposed to viewing them as an inconvenience? So I would say that it's it's not only just age, generational, but it's also just how much experience that they have as well. And again, thank you so much for all these questions. Keep feeding to me. I will try to get to as many as we possibly can. But text us 913-303-7428.
So let's hover there for just a second. And when we talk about the disconnect in the generations, first as leaders, it starts with us. We got to lead by example. Culture never trickles up; it always trickles down. And so it starts with us, and how the veterans on our team see us connect, lead, guide, respond to maybe that new employee, that younger employee. Stephanie, we didn't, I don't know if we fully finished it, but any additional thoughts, then we'll throw it to Erik, as it relates to how we can do a better job of communicating and connecting maybe our generation with Gen Z.
Well, I think part of it is I talked a lot about self-awareness in my conversation with y'all today. And the big part about self-awareness is a lot of times people don't know how they show up. And sharing a story, I told you I had a 20+ year career in broadcast, and that started as an intern, and then it moved to full-time sales rep. And I had a one-to-one review with my sales manager when I was a sales rep, and she talked to me about my nonverbals in the sales meeting. I was clueless. I was clueless. So I think a mistake that we can make as leaders, and they were bad nonverbals, by the way, they weren't positive. And I was slouching and I was doing the crossed arms and the eye rolls, and I didn't know. I didn't know I was doing it. And so I think that we have to not assume intent.
Mhm.
And we have to have those one-to-one conversations and we have to set the groundwork. That person informed me that I was modeling this behavior. I was unaware, but I became aware. Now, if I would have continued it, that conversation looks different because we had a conversation about it initially. The other thing that I think that you can do in Quick Connects is you can find out, to Eric's point, get to know the person more. You know, one question that I love to use that's very disarming, I think, when you're having a conversation about conflict, whether it's being on air, valuing sales, or sales valuing on air, or generations valuing one another. If there's a disagreement, use the question, if 99% of it is their fault, 99% is all on air's fault, what's the 1% that you could own? Most of the time,
That.
people can always come up with a 1%. And it tends to often be, oh, well, it's more than 1%. It's probably 20% my fault.
Right, right.
Tell me about that. And now we have a baseline. You didn't tell them what to do, they leaned into it.
Love that. Eric, thoughts?
Well, I think, you know, generationally, if we look at them as a generation, we've already made our first mistake, right? We should look at them as productive team members. We
These
should look at
people.
them as leaders. They can think and act like leaders, future leaders. Really, the worst trend to happen to the millennials. I did a TEDx talk, and it was said, and the TEDx talk was millennials are not your leadership challenge. And I gave that talk years ago when millennials were getting the brunt of generational bias, right? They were just talking bad about them because that they were actually using their own name against them. Millennials are this while they're in the room. Um, and now millennials are, I don't know, 80% of the military. So here's what my whole thing on this is: develop them as leaders, but also tap into their strengths. If you want something done, to research something, give it to a Gen Z. They're going to find it before you finish asking for it online. They're going to be able to use AI to help enhance things. So we've got to tap in. Every generation communicates slightly different, uses technology slightly different, listens to music slightly different, watches entertainment slightly different. Doesn't mean that it's all bad. It just means that we need to tap into their strengths. And each generation can learn from the other generation's strengths, whereas it might be a weakness for me. So I think that, you know, removing the kind of that nomenclature that, you know, this generation, and start saying these leaders,
Yeah.
these younger leaders, but they all need to be developed, and everybody can be cohesive and unified under a mission, vision, core values, and certain expectations. We could be unified under that. I left the Corps in 91. I'm still part of the club. I'm still part of that culture, even though
Right, right.
they might say other guys my age are old guys, not me, but other guys, you know? So
I
I
had
think just find ways to include them more. They want to be included. They are a very ambitious generation. The Gen Zs and the millennials, they've got a lot to offer, but sometimes the other generations aren't asking for it enough. They exclude them and then wonder why they don't feel included.
I've got a video up on 10-Minute Trainer Network I did with one of my daughters. I got two Gen Z daughters, 3 daughters, two Gen Z. And she said, you all raised us to not accept less, but now you're hiring us and expecting us to do that very thing. She said, if you don't give us the culture that we want, we're going to go find it somewhere else. Okay. So when they leave, we need to be asking, why did they leave? And not just thinking it's on them. I think it's on us.
You know what? And you brought this up a while ago. 72% of the workforce is sleepwalking. Are they all Z?
Well, and that's the thing. The Gen Z, they want leadership. I mentor a Gen Z at a local high school. I just met with them this morning. They give you hope for the future, but if you're helping to mentor them the right way, they're receptive to it. Now, every generation, even maybe Gen X, I doubt it because we're the greatest generation.
Cheers to you.
There's got to be a few losers out there. You know, I don't know. But I heard an interesting stat. There was a study that was saying that they look at Gen Z as the most like the greatest generation.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so, wow. Why aren't we tapping into that? You know, I mean,
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Brian's giving us the hey over here.
No, I was just going to say I'm a millennial and I just tuned you guys out.
Okay.
I am so sorry. No.
I should have mentioned that in my TED Talk.
I got a question here, and I hope I'm going to ask it right here, but it's kind of the opposite, right? I believe this person is a manager, a leader, but I think they're talking about, leadership above them. And I think the general idea is, hey, how do we work around a leader position in our company who's more concerned about their title and status than productivity? Listen, they're still very effective in their work, just not so much on the leadership side. How do we navigate this, but not be a micromanager that helps keep the work culture alive, right? So it's kind of like they're the middle person, right? And it's finding that balance. So it's kind of the reverse of what
And we know micromanagement's the weakest form of leadership out there. But Stephanie, thoughts on that question?
I was gonna toss this one to Erik.
Yeah.
We just tossed it to you.
No,
I
hot
mean, I can
potato.
take a stab at it. I'll take a stab at it. I feel that frontline leadership, if I'm hearing this correctly, they're one of the most important roles in the entire company. They are the liaison between senior leadership and the rest of the team, which is the bulk of the company. I think it again goes down to expectations need to be laid out for every position. It's interesting because most job descriptions talk about the job that leader does. It doesn't talk about their leadership expectations within that role, and that needs to shift. Don't change it, enhance it. That person also needs to know when you're focused on this instead of productivity, here's the impact it has on the team. We've got to address that with them and have those direct conversations with them as a leader. Are you aware that this behavior, these actions you're taking is impacting the team like this? Because always under the microscope of leadership, those actions are interpreted. So if that person isn't focused on certain things that they should be, everybody knows about it. And it diminishes their reputation as a leader also.
Well,
Here's the other thing I'll say. I'm going to say this last thing. Leadership is like coaching a sports team. Sometimes you're going to invest in them. You're going to give them the plays. You're going to help them every way, support them, guide them, coach them, mentor them. Sometimes you got to make a trade.
Yeah, fair.
Okay.
You mentioned productivity was in that question. You mentioned it. So I wrote down, and I want to hover here for just a second, busy versus productive, okay? Because we all talk about it. And I guess I would frame it up this way because I knew it was a point I wanted us to get to. Does continuing to use the word busy affect our credibility?
So I'll take a stab at this one. That was one of my slides. I believe it does because I believe that people are interpreting it in a way that you might not expect. So you have to be aware of the word. Like if we know that there's a difference between these two words, go with the word with the higher calling, go with the word with the deeper impact, because everybody says words are important. And that means we can't just go, yeah, but I just like using it. I learned a long time ago, somebody told me some very, very, very important word. My wife and I have been married 27 years, together 30. We've experienced 4 battles of cancer, cardiac arrest, deaths in the family, everything you can imagine, all that stuff. And somebody gave me great wedding tip advice when I was younger. And they said, if your wife ever says she's fine, you know how that ends. She's not.
Oh, yeah.
And here's the thing. So what that guy was saying is words are important. Listen for them. When a leader's using busy casually, somebody's interpreting it intentionally. So just be careful. You may not have bad intentions using the word. You may not have bad intentions, but somebody could interpret it. To body language. I might be cold. I live in Minnesota. It's cold. Somebody could interpret this that I'm closed off. But that wasn't what I was saying. But perception is reality. Be careful.
It's not lost on me that Stephanie's a Minnesota girl too, and she used the word y'all a little bit ago.
Yeah,
so, okay,
I noticed that
speaking
too.
to my Kentucky there.
I like that word. I just don't say it right.
Okay, Brian, we got another
I've got one right here too. So.
Okay, yeah. I think I was just going to kind of adjust a little bit. So we've had this pop up before, right? That some of we've had a lot of managers that come from the sales side, right? And they've grown up and come into the leadership side, and so it's just I think there's a lot of folks that have chimed in on, hey, we're struggling with that, right? That they find that they don't know how to find that balance of, well, I worked myself up into this leadership role, but they don't know how to be a leader. They just know how to be a seller. And I think that creates conflict. And Stephanie, I know that's a lot of your background too, right? That's exactly where you were kind of painting your picture in this morning's session.
So is this person looking for guidance,
I
Brian?
think, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And this person is the supervisor that's promoted this person, or this person has the job?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And like an owner. Yes, correct.
Yeah. I believe that oftentimes we promote people because they're really good at what they do, and then we don't equip them with the tools to effectively lead. We assume because they were good at the previous job that they can teach others how to do it. So we have to be careful in how we promote and why we promote. And we have to make sure that we set and empower that leader or that person that we're promoting and elevating to be successful. Otherwise, it's the easiest way to lose a great performer in the organization, right? So taking a look at who you're promoting and what they're strong in, having a conversation and finding out where they are looking to grow or where you feel they need to grow. They may not have leadership skills. They may have a lot of sales skills, but they don't know how to lead. You can develop that, but they have to want it. So let's make sure that we're having the conversation with the person about what the job entails, being clear about what success is. To me, as a sales manager, you need to be looking to develop people and to hit budget. And all the other stuff is noise. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things to do. We can all be busy every day. But if those are your two North Stars and you're focused on developing a skill set around those, you're setting that person up to win.
Okay, so we got a bunch of questions we're not getting to, but we're up against it. So let me do this. Let me get you to comment on this as we dump out. I led a 2-day strategic planning retreat a couple of weeks ago with a Rural Water Association, and the majority of the training that they talked about was specific to water. It was never specific to people. Okay, will you all just give us your final thoughts on the need to grow leaders, the need to coach, guide people in doing a better job of leading their team and not just focused on their product? Erik, throw it to you first.
Well, I'll say this. We often promote people based on availability, not capability. And just because somebody's available doesn't mean that they're capable. And the capability comes with developing them as leaders. And what Derron was just talking about with water is they professionally and fluently spoke their industry, but they were not speaking leadership. And why were they not speaking leadership? They don't have an established leadership language. They don't have a leadership definition. They don't have anything to fall back on. And it's highly likely most of the leaders have never been through a leadership course. So that which you don't know, you ignore. And so you go to where your strong point is. I know water, I'll talk water. I know broadcast, I'll talk broadcast. I've never been developed as a leader, but I have the title. So if somebody feels like I don't know what I'm talking about, I'll be called out. I'll stick with water. And so to Stephanie's point earlier, every single person has to go through leadership development. It's not a suggestion, right? It's your system for building people from day one. Start planting leadership seeds way before they're promoted.
No.
Okay, ended on that one.
Yeah. Stephanie, final thoughts?
Really well said, Erik. I alluded to it again today. It's when we promote people based on the actionable things of only what they do and what they accomplish, we miss. There's a big blind spot there. We're missing that person. We need a leader to care deeply about not just the success of themselves, but of others. It's the only way to level up in an organization. And so we have to develop humans, healthy humans that thrive in the workplace and in their personal lives. If we don't equip them with those skills, we're setting ourselves up for failure and long-term, our organization up for a lot of gaps on an org chart.